So warm welcome to what is really a key topic. I would say it's the doorway into spirituality, and this is the doorway which many people are going to come through in the months and years ahead, because resilience occurs when your back is up against the wall and you can't rely on anything or anyone else. And if you just think of what's happened even in the last year in terms of politics and all the different professions and occupations and religions, everything is being shaken, and our faith and everything seems to be disappearing, and then we're under huge pressure ourselves as individuals, and you can either sort of throw your hands up in horror and think, oh God, isn't this awful, and then try and hide away and hope it will go away, and in other words, sink, really, or you see it as a wonderful opportunity and a time to learn and grow and change. And this is the approach which we're taking here, and it's all about connecting with all those many resources inside yourself and bringing them up. So our two experts in living are going to come on the stage now. First there's Paul Pitchforks. I'd like him to come up here, and then Asher. So I'm just going to say a few words about Paul at this stage. So I came across him only recently at the Spirit of Coaching Retreat, and he's a lieutenant colonel in the army. He has a military cross for exceptional leadership in Afghanistan when he had to, he and his group of 70 soldiers were engaged in a 10-hour battle with the Taliban, and he managed to bring all the men out alive. Only 2 of them got shot, but as he described it, they were clean wounds. One bullet went straight through somebody's knee, and the other one went straight through their shoulder. He's very matter of fact about it, but it sounded quite bad to me, and I wouldn't like it to happen. So he's our first one, and then afterwards I'll introduce Asher. And even though they appear to be completely opposite, one's a mother, the other's a soldier, one's male, one's female, you'd be surprised at how much they have in common beneath the surface. And this is what we're going to discover in the next half hour or so. So each of them is going to speak for 15 minutes. I might intervene at some stage. No, I'm eating up your time, sorry.
I've got my eye on the clock, don't I?
Yeah, so we must watch that clock, must we? But so you're going to tell us a little bit about yourself, about what resilience means to you, and what's the other thing? Yeah, how it's helped you in your very interesting life. I should also say, I forgot to say this bit, he is on the verge of leaving the army, he's retraining, and his ambition, the year after next, God knows why he's got this ambition, but it's to row single-handed across the Indian Ocean. So, he's going to need all the resilience he can find. But over to you.
Thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. It's a real privilege to be asked by John, especially as you said, having not known him for very long, to come and speak to you in an establishment like this, particularly for a soldier. Perhaps not an obvious match, but I'm really delighted to be here. So resilience. John asked me to have a little think about what resilience means to me, and I hadn't actually thought about it, if I'm honest, over the years and years where I suppose I've been drawing upon it. I've served for 18 years in the army. I've served on about 6 or 7 deployments all over the world: Sierra Leone, Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan. And I also seem to choose things in my own personal life as well to be resilience, not least rowing the Indian Ocean, which I haven't yet done. But I love climbing mountains on my own and canoeing long distances and things like this. But I'd never stopped to really think what it was, so it was an interesting exploration for me. I suppose the headline I came up with, Davina's bouncing back is one interpretation. I looked at it perhaps a bit more bluntly and thought it was just the ability to persevere, the ability to continue when faced with a challenge. And those challenges, when I looked at it a bit further, sort of fell into 4 categories, I felt. There's the physical, there's mental, there's emotional, there's spiritual challenges, which I've experienced all of. But I think they sit in a hierarchy. I think physical is most definitely the one that can confront you most easily. But all the other three exist in a hierarchy, and a sort of supportive hierarchy, I think, below those. Because actually physical isn't really physical. Everybody has their own physical limitations, and you'll always reach it if you push yourself far enough. It's actually your mental resilience to be able to carry on when you think that you're about to fall over. And I think underpinning mental is very much the emotional. And deep somewhere below all of that is what you could call spiritual resilience. I think, you could call that a number of different things, and I'm going to identify it perhaps as your core values and your core beliefs, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it was interesting to see this pyramid and how they all interlink. And when I was thinking about this idea of confronting those challenges in those four domains in order to persevere, I remembered a quote which I probably read about 20 years ago, and I've always remembered it, and it's always been at the forefront of my mind when in a situation where resilience has been important to me. And that was from a mountaineer, and I can't remember unfortunately which one it was. It was either a chap called Doug Scott, who went to the summit of Everest and got stuck overnight just below the summit at about 28,000 feet, or another chap called Stephen Venables, who's also a mountaineer who had exactly the same experience about 10 years later. And they were talking about frostbite. And the mountaineer's worst fear is getting stuck at high altitude and losing their toes or their fingers through frostbite. But this guy had such sort of confidence, I think, and such focus and such resilience in what he was faced. He said it wasn't about surviving frostbite, it was the quality with which you survive frostbite. So as far as he was concerned, coming back alive but with no toes was not good enough. He wanted to come back alive but with all of his toes. So it was defining the ability to persevere at a higher level, striving for a higher level, not just good enough, but striving for the best. So I think resilience really is about that. I don't think it's about just dragging yourself through. So John said we can either sink or we can swim. Well, I don't think it's swimming, doggy paddle, gasping for breath, and just making it to the other side of the lake. I think it's being able to swim confidently, strong front crawl, 10 laps, and then get out the other side. Because that's really what we should be aspiring to. And yes, of course, the bare minimum is enough to keep us going, but that's not enough in my opinion. When I was thinking about resilience as well, I suddenly realised, drawing on my own experiences, and I'll share a couple with you in a moment, the really fundamental, perhaps other than physical resilience, where you just got to kind of put your head down and get on with it, really fundamental to all three other parts that I've defined is decision making. Your ability to make decisions in the face of adversity, in the face of confusion, in the case of doubt. And I think where I've drawn strength over my time in the military is my ability to make decisions when faced with difficult situations, and that predominantly has come through training. Now, in life, you don't have the opportunity to train for life, you might think, whereas in the military, where we're training for something very specific, then we can recreate that and do it over and over and over again in a training environment. And that brings confidence. That develops a sense of self-confidence. It develops a sense of belief in yourself, such that when you are then faced with something very difficult, you can, if not fall back on something that you've done before, which resembles the situation that's confronting you, you can at least fall back on the fact that you've dealt with difficulty, you've dealt with ambiguity, you've dealt with uncertainty, you've dealt with fear, because you can, by and large, replicate that. So I think, a real challenge in trying to address this personally amongst ourselves, in our own lives, is how do we replicate events such that when push comes to shove and you're faced with something, you have that self-confidence and that self-belief. And I think actually, you can train throughout life. Every situation you can treat as a training event, I suppose, as well as a real event. That being that, you have to test yourself. I really believe that in life, those people who pick the easy path are the people who are going to struggle when confronted with difficulties in future times. You have to be prepared to test yourself, and you have to be prepared to push yourself to an area where you might not otherwise have exercised. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean something physical, swimming further, climbing a high mountain, or whatever. But I think you can do this emotionally. I think you can challenge yourself, and this is a journey I'm now on after 18 years in the military. I'm suddenly having this prospect of trying to redefine my course in life outside of the military, an organisation where it was a huge family, basically. And somebody I spoke to just recently about it has compared it to bereavement, leaving an organisation that you've been very close to, you've done a long with for 18 years. And I think where I'm seeking some solace to make me more resilient as I go into this unknown area is that I'm now turning inwards and I'm looking more to my own emotional, my own spiritual self and challenging myself. I'm doing things that I might not have thought that I would naturally do 3 or 4 years ago when I was in my comfort zone. And so by challenging myself now, I think I'll be more prepared in future for what may come my way. So I think we can replicate this idea of training for life by living life in a particular way and with a particular attitude. But to give you perhaps some examples of decision making and how I've dealt with it in the past, I found I did a tour in Afghanistan, as John has said, and when I think about sort of times when I had to show resilience there, the ones that stand out are where I had difficult decisions to make, not so much sort of, I just got to drive on through this thing. It's when I actually had a chance to stop and deliberate over a really difficult decision. I'll give you a couple of examples. We would sometimes detain Afghan civilians if we believed that they might be Taliban or associated with the Taliban. Yeah, unlike in an all battlefield where you might imagine you have an enemy that's wearing a particular uniform and you know they're over there somewhere. Yeah, the Taliban are mixed in with the civilian population, so it's impossible to define them. And I was confronted on a number of occasions with situations where I was being told that this particular individual may be associated with the Taliban, either from our own intelligence or from Afghan soldiers who were working alongside us. And I had to confront this individual. I had to look this man in the eye and decide whether or not I was going to effectively arrest him and send him back to, God knows what, actually, because they would go back into the Afghan police system. They weren't really looked after by us, other than for a short period of time. And they were real decisions that went much deeper than the mental, well into the emotional and probably into the spiritual area, because I wasn't just dealing with a potential member of the Taliban, I was dealing with a human being. I had on one instance a young man who was probably about 20 years old. And on the other end of the scale I had an old man who was about 77, who we found in a compound, which was his home, with his family, but we also found a large amount of bomb-making equipment in his compound. And I had to make decisions that were going to directly impact on this person's life. And that, to me, is a situation where I needed resilience. How did I go about it? It's extremely difficult. And there were certain mechanisms I could draw upon. I often used those around me. And I had the advantage of having been in the same regiment all my career, so the soldiers who I was serving with were people I knew when I was 23, 24 years old. And I'd grown up with, I suppose, in the professional sense. And to be able to turn to somebody and gain a second opinion from someone who I trusted and cared about, even though ultimately the decision rested on me, was a hugely powerful way of clearing in my mind whether or not it was the right thing to do. That occurred once as well when I was on we were ordered by my commanding officer to do an 18-kilometre march through the mountains. This was in the Afghan winter, so it's exceedingly cold and deep snow. And my mission, as we like to call it in the army, was to get to this particular village before first light, so that we surprise any Taliban who might be there. So I duly set off, and I had a lot of pressure on me. I disagreed with the mission entirely. I thought it wasn't feasible, and I said it, but I was told to do it. So there was a lot of pressure on me to get this done. And after about an hour and a half, 2 of my soldiers collapsed from hypothermia, and there was no way I could get a helicopter to extract them. There was no way I could get them forward to where we were due to go. I had to turn around. But the weight of responsibility that had been placed on me by my superior was such that it was a really, really difficult decision for me to just say, I'm going to throw this in and go back. And also I think a sense of pride. The ego was kicking in. And I think that's something which you really have to deal with when you're being resilient. You have to try and overlook that. And again, I called upon one of these guys, my Sergeant Major, who I'd known for many, many years. I called him forward and said, look, what do you think we should do? And he said, without flickering, he looked me in the eye and said, we've got to go back. People are going to die. And that was enough for me to make the decision. So, I suppose my key lesson from that is resilience isn't something which you should always try and turn inwards and find within yourself. Resilience is provided for by those around you and by those whom you trust. You'd be a fool only to try and fight your way through something using your own resources if you are fortunate enough to have people around you who can deliver that sort of advice, that support and that sort of love. Just a couple of other observations before I stop. I really think, as I said at the beginning, when we sort of dip into that spiritual level of those 4 tiers, what it really is all about for me is about values and belief. And one of my core values, which I think has been imbued into me since I was a young boy, is a sense of what I've been calling service up until about half an hour ago when I had a chat with John. He rightly said, look, service isn't the right word, particularly for this sort of environment. It's actually love. But I use the word service because it fits the model that I'm talking about. You know, the Army, the British Army has a phrase at its officers' school. Its motto is serve to lead. So actually your leadership is through service. It's not through people serving you. You serve those who have entrusted themselves, which is frankly what it is, to you. And I think if you have a core value like that, mine being the sense of service, that whenever I was faced with a very difficult position, I really recognised that I might have 100, 200 people who were under my direct command, some of whom I'd never met before. Because the interesting thing in Afghanistan is we mix up a lot, and I had American soldiers, I had Dutch soldiers, I had Afghans who I'd never met before. But they had entrusted their lives by saying, you know, we do what you say. And the only way you can repay that is through service, through doing the right thing. And that base value for me has been what has carried me through all of the difficult times where I've had responsibility for people below me. You know, and it ultimately, I think, does boil down, as John pointed out in an earlier discussion with me, it boils down to love. You know, I care about these people, whether I've known them for 15 years or whether they're people who have just been introduced to me before a particular mission. I care about these people because we're all out there doing the same thing, and they trust their lives. I know that sounds dramatic, but that's the truth of it. They trust their lives in my decision making and my judgment. And so if you're not prepared to push yourself until the very, 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 very end, and trust me, you will rarely ever reach the end. You might think you will, but the harder you push, the further you go. If you're not prepared to do that, then you shouldn't be doing it. And my final point, that's values. We could discuss values in a whole load of other areas, I suspect. But my other point is belief. You've really got to believe in what you do. And people might say, well, you know, did you believe in what was going on in Afghanistan? And I'm prepared to say in some instances, not necessarily. But that wasn't the point. I believed in the people that I was serving and that I was working with. And in that, I count the soldiers who I was serving, but I also count the Afghan civilians who I would come into contact with every day. Because it's a human thing. You know, you look a man in the eye and you see his situation, and if you believe in that individual, if you have love for that individual, I suppose, then once again it makes the difficulties that I was confronted with worth doing. Because I wasn't interested in what the Prime Minister was talking about, the President of Afghanistan. I was interested in the people I was meeting, the souls who were part of my day, that particular day that I got up in the morning and went out into the world. And if you have that belief, then that belief will carry you. But if that belief is ever lost, and genuinely lost, and if you can't find belief, even when it might seem obscure, you know, I think when you look hard, you'll actually discover that there is something which you hold as a very strong belief in amongst a really, really difficult and sometimes dark situation. But if you do lose that belief, then it's time to quit. It's time to quit whatever you're doing and do something else. And I'm not suggesting I'm leaving the army because I've lost belief, I haven't. But I would say that I have questioned whether I want to go back to Afghanistan again, whether it's really worth 2 years of my life, whether I'd be the right person to stand up in front of soldiers who need to go back out for the third or fourth time. I think I have lost a bit of belief in that. And therefore I think that's contributed to my decision to leave what would otherwise have been a very successful career, which I loved, you know, and I had a lot of opportunity to carry on and go upwards and onwards. But I felt it was the right thing to do. So that's a key message that I've taken away, is that don't just be sort of pig-headed in life and drive on regardless. There are times when you've just got to accept this isn't something I believe in, and I can't therefore endure this. You know, I can't bounce back from this, and have the courage to give it up and go and do something else. I could go on for hours, and I'm sure there's a couple of questions, and John might, you know, ask me a couple of other things, but I'd like to stop at this point just to keep on time and
Thank you. You've done that with military precision. Exactly 15 minutes. I think I should have gone into the army for a couple of years. And I need to improve my swimming because I'm not much better than doggy paddling. So yeah, you're a mirror for me. I've got a lot to change yet. I was thinking of having some swimming lessons. Maybe I'll do it after this. So thank you very much. So there's lots of things what you said, but there are underlying that there is the love, and the love that our definition of love is quite different from lots of other people's. It's not sloppy or sentimental. It's having good wishes and pure feelings, and that obviously comes out the way you think about the men in your club, and also how you think about other people, like potential Taliban fighters. You're not coming from a position of hate or negativity, but you're treating everybody as equal with respect and things like that. And that comes out very clearly from the conversation I had earlier on. And then underlying that, a lot of it is your courage and your determination. So we're just going to spend a minute in silence reflecting on what we've just heard and learning the lessons and applying them to our own life. Because resilience is very practical. Now it's a pleasure to introduce Asha. And the same qualities you will see emerging in her. First of all, her courage of coming up on the stage here, because she's never done anything like this before. And she was a little nervous beforehand. I'm sure that's disappearing, isn't it? So Asha's been studying with the Brahma Kumaris for about 10 years. She's been in this country for 18 years, originally from Mauritius. And she shared some of her story with me last week, and in her own way she's needed just as much courage and determination and faith and everything else, because for 31 years she lived in Mauritius and had a very easy life in some ways. She had maids to look after and a mother who did lots of cooking and washing and things, and she was able to be a career woman and spend all her time working. And then she married the man that she'd met a few years previously, who lived over in England, gave everything up over there and came here and suddenly found herself in a strange country, not knowing anybody, and soon became pregnant and had 2 daughters with no training or conditioning in how to be a mother or anything like that, and went through a big depression and all sorts of things. So her story is very interesting too, and you're going to tell us what resilience means to you. Give us a couple of examples, aren't you? And she got a degree when she was over here. I forgot to mention that. Yes. And you now work part-time in a school, don't you? So, yes, teaching, yes, young children.
Good afternoon. Well, you're going to hear my heart. I heartbeat in my voice. I'm sorry about that, and I hope you don't mind. Check on my notes, because my mind gone all mushy. I have to check my notes every time if it's okay with you lot. Well, resilience for me, this word came across to me when I was doing a course to work with children. And for me it was like, I didn't have a clue what it meant to start with. And now again, to think about my life, this word resilience, to use my experience and then to how I've built on this resilience. I didn't know I've done it. It's only by thinking about it that I know, yes, I've done it, and I've managed to overcome barriers and tension, such as things to get me to move on in life. And that would mean to, first of all, to build my inner strength. And I always had control in my life, well, I thought. But coming in this country, that I felt like I never had control. And I can't control anything. Everything is all over the place, blaming others, and feeling unhappy. And I didn't know how to, because people had expectations from me as a wife, and then soon after having babies, to be a mother. Never seen anyone looking after a small baby. And then I know my mom always, she's been a wife and mother, but never really look into it, how, to be a mother. And what do? I was very depressed, and at some point in my life I found the Brahma Kumaris, and coming here has helped me to really build my inner strength, which I didn't have at all, to make decisions in life about myself and my two little girls that I had to care and nurture. And how to do that, I didn't know. It doesn't come in a book. Situations are different. I'm going through tensions. I'm having problem with my husband, and what do I do? There's no true answers. So coming here, and for me, I'm very fortunate to be here, and which has helped me a lot. And really to have the courage to see clearly what I really want in life, and how to progress in my role as a mother. At some point, I did get divorced. That was the biggest ever decision I made in my life. Just saying, yes, I want to do that, because there were too many expectations and that I couldn't deliver, and that was just affecting my life. I couldn't look after my two little children. So for me, like, just saying that, yes, I want to do that, was a big thing for me. And it was when I started to come here, I was fortunate to see that junkie every day. I'll come here every day. I used to live here, not close by. And the help and support I got from the family here, starting with that junkie and few other sisters and brothers who helped me, talk to me, and I had this strong support, and they listened to me. And just by me talking, and then they'll just tell me a few words, and those words made me think that I can do that. I can move on. I can leave everything behind and move on. That I couldn't do before. I couldn't move on because I always had the support of my parents. And here when I came, it was my husband. And now suddenly I'm alone and didn't know what to do. But I wasn't alone. I had a big support here. And my life was never better, and it just got better. There are loads of situations now that, things that I used before, but anything I've done before, there are certain things that still applies here. The tension's there. Now my children are teenagers, one 16, one 14. It's a challenge every day. And I don't know how to, sometimes I don't know what to do. But I've promised myself I'll listen to them. And by listening to them, I've learned that I can help them. And by helping them, I'm helping myself. And it's this I feel like this big courage in me. I don't know where that comes from. I've always been someone who hides somewhere in a corner. You'll see me somewhere in a corner there, watching others doing this is not me. I don't go and talk to anybody. I have people who know me, I talk a lot, but this is strange for me. But I'm proud of myself for being able to do and achieve what I've achieved today. And because I have this trust in myself that I can do it. And having all these connections, such as I do meditation and know how to connect with myself and be truthful to myself. When I do wrong, I know what I'm wrong, and I know what I need to do to change that. And I'm sure all of you go through it's a mundane life. I don't have a big, exciting life, but simple. But sometimes when you're on your own, you don't know, you're not sure, or for me it's like, am I doing the right thing? Is it the right decision? I have to even look for school for my daughter for her to do her A-levels. They don't have sixth forms in their school, so I have to look for something else. So that's another challenge for me, because the other parent would say, oh, no, this is not good. Okay, who do I listen to my daughter, or do I listen to the dad? So if I listen to the dad, my daughter will be unhappy with me. If I listen to my daughter, I'm going to have something there. But for me, it's listen to everybody, and for me, it's just let them make their own decision. Because by doing that, I'm going to feel that if they are happy, that's her life, and I go along with them. Like my daughter, I go along with her, and that's the choice she makes, and that's going to build her resilience to be able to make decisions in her life. It's just seeing me to cooperate with her, and seeing me, someone who listen and take account of what they want to do in life, and allow them to be. And there are many situations that is always out of my control. I feel out of control, but I do try to bring calmness within myself and think, I can't be out of control, I can be in control, and I learn to be in control. And it's not always easy, but I find ways to reflect on situations, and by reflecting, I'm aware of what's going on, and find solutions. And for me, for doing all this has made me be positive, see things positively, and know that I can face with any sort of problems and any situation, because I know I can do it.
Great, okay. Look, the time flew by, it wasn't so bad, so thank you very much. Thanks for sharing that. So I'm just going to ask you very briefly to give your 3 tips each. So we'd like to get yours, Paul, because I'm aware of the time.
Sure. I think two I alluded to quite clearly. One is really believing what you're doing, either the activity or more importantly the people. And if you don't have that belief, question whether or not you're on the right path. The second one is don't try and do it alone. Draw upon those around you. Resilience can come from any angle or any person, and doesn't all have to come from within. And thirdly, one I didn't touch on quite so much perhaps, is I really, I did talk about this idea of pushing yourself in order to develop yourself. You know, in anything you do in life, challenge yourself. But I particularly think that pertains to identifying a journey for yourself, for self-development, and facing the areas, knowing the areas where you may have weaknesses or fears, and facing them and really challenging yourself over them. And I think if you continue on that sort of journey throughout life of wanting to improve yourself and develop yourself, then you will, by definition, just get stronger.
Thank you. Asha?
Well, take my, for example, from my own resolution would be to be aware of situations and always discover new ways of looking at situations and get a new hold in the present, which enables you to let go of the past for you to be able to move on. And involved sometimes, I think, if you're involved in good actions, sometimes it helps you to be content and move on. And have good company and positive influences around you. This is very important.
Thank you very much. So there's lots of similarities, isn't there, when you step back and look at the situations. And in our discussion earlier on, you were saying, well, I'm not a family man and all this, but in actual fact we discovered that underneath this all, you both have great courage, both have great determination, and both have a lot of love, practical love. And you're driven and motivated partly by the care and responsibility for your two daughters, and very clearly, you've been driven and motivated by the care for a group of men, 70 to 200, whatever the number has been. And so we came to the conclusion you've been like a father and you've been a mother. So even though you appear not to have much in common on one level, once you start discussing it, there's all sorts of things underneath which are very, very similar. So I'd like to thank you both very much for being very open and honest. I think honesty is a good quality to have when it comes to resilience. You're not deceiving yourself and pretending you know it all when you don't. Because again, both of you referred to that, and you do seek support or advice from others. You don't have to do it all alone. And if you think back to the war days, not that I was around then, but they talk about that, that spirit, the war spirit, everybody working together. So resilience doesn't mean doing it all by yourself, but it does mean taking responsibility for yourself, doesn't it? And doing the best that you can, and then working together in cooperation with others to make things even better. So thank you both very much.